So the next speaker is Irénée Robin, the managing partner at VVR Medical, a Sino-French consultancy firm whose mission is to help its clients secure and sustain their industrial and commercial development in China. Irénée himself has lived in China for 24 years. He worked for the Institut Pasteur of Shanghai. He organized the Bio Convention in China. He was head of international business for Shanghai New Summit Biopharma, and he has helped establish 4 different foreign joint ventures, one of which was in the IVD industry. So Irénée, over to you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Let me share my screen and let me know if you can see it clearly.
I see updated policy, yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. When I am going to focus mostly on one of the subjects our team masters most, which is actually regulatory policy. Regulatory, as we all know, plays a very strong role in a go, no-go decision when it comes to entering a new market or developing a new product line on the Chinese market. So instead of going towards, let's say, policy on industrialization or etc., I will focus mostly on regulatory because my understanding is this is what our audience will benefit most from. So to start with, I'm going to have a very quick review on the regulatory principles regarding diagnostics in China. Then go back very quickly to key figures of last year and major changes in 2023 and 2024 on the regulatory space. Then I will finish with 2 case studies, one of which in AI, which will be a nice transition to our next speaker. When it comes to imported IVD registration, there are some principles that some of you may know, but in any case, it's worthwhile reminding. The first one is that diagnostic products in China are regulatory-wise are considered medical devices. It's not like in Europe, for instance, when we have MDR and IVDR. Here, medical devices cover instruments, equipment, apparatus, in vitro diagnostic reagents, etc. You can see from the definition of a medical device, by the way, from an NMPA perspective, that we are very close to the definition in force in Europe, which, especially for the European friends here, is quite nice because it means that if you have or are transitioning towards MDR or IVDR, you will have, it's going to be easier for you to introduce new products in China. In terms of classification, what is important to notice is that same as in other regions, MD and diagnostic products are classified according to their class of risk, from class 1, the less risky, to class 3, the most risky, the riskiest. However, one should know that those classes are not equivalent to what is in force either in Europe or in the US. So one should not assume that a class 2 in other regions of the world would be considered as a class 2 in China. If we go a little bit more into detail on those 3 classes, class 1 is a closed list, which means there is a catalog, there is a list, a precise list of what can be registered as a class 1 in China. You're either on the list or you're not. And if you're not on the list, then it's going to be a different class. And then class 2 and class 3, as we will see, are ruled by catalogs. Quick focus on IVD reagents before that. And when we talk about IVD reagents, we obviously talk about mostly the liquid products that go into fish, IHC, etc., analyzers, and very simple products, so to speak. There is a list of 6,840 IVD reagents that dates back from 2013 and has not been updated, that actually focuses particularly on those products. However, as we all know, diagnostics is a much broader field than that. And we have quite a lot of products that do not enter into this category. And in that case, they are definitely part of the medical device catalog, which includes non-IVD reagent diagnostics products. So this catalog as well is based on two very important documents, Decree number 15 and Decree number 104, respectively, the last one being from 2017. Broadly explain, depending on where you are or what your product does, whether it should be a class 2 or a class 3, and how would clinical evaluation be conducted. However, obviously, the catalog is always a little bit backwards compared to the industry, because it's complicated to update a catalog exactly at par or at the same speed as innovators invent new products. So what happens for non-catalog MD or diagnostics products? There are two things, two points here that we can talk about. The first one is, in China, from a regulatory standpoint, there is an equivalent to a breakthrough products in the US, for instance. It's called innovative or priority, for instance. Innovative, you need to show unique innovation by way of China granted patents, for instance. Priority, it's not exactly the same. Priority is when there is a huge medical need or a strong unmet medical need in a particular therapeutic area. And all those two are subject to a specific approach. The biggest value of applying for innovative or priority status, or being able to do so, and we'll see some figures later on, is because the moment you are innovative or priority in your regulatory process, you have an NMPA team that will work with you on your clinical program, which means that there will be a pre-approval of your clinical program, clinical trial, for instance, if you have to do one in China, which is often the case with innovative devices. You will have an NMPA team that will pre-validate with you that your program will be satisfactory from their standpoint. And this obviously is a bit of time to invest at the beginning of the process, but a lot of time to save after the clinic. If you are not in this category and your clinical evaluation requires a clinical trial in China, you will have to design your clinical trial by yourself, and you will not have an official position of the NMPA before you undergo this clinical trial. So this is something always to consider. And in the case studies a little bit later on, I've got one innovative device. We will come back to this. Then a second aspect, if you're not innovative and not priority, but still not part of a catalog because you're bringing something new, or there is no category that fits your product, there is a specific process of official classification request. In Chinese, it's Nifenliting. And this process is very interesting because it's quite short. It's essentially a 2 to 4 month maximum, and it's binding for the regulator and non-binding for you, which means that if you submit your documentation for an official classification and the NMPA tells you your device is a class 2, your diagnostics is a class 2, they have to abide by it. But if they come back to you and say, I'm sorry, from my standpoint and what you gave me, I consider you as a class 3 and you will have a big clinical program to conduct in China before authorization, you may well think another way and tweak a little bit your dossier and submit in a different way so as to avoid this class 3, for instance, and to go for a simpler, to try and have a simpler regulatory pathway. The fact that they gave you a class 3 doesn't mean that you have to go in their direction. This is actually due to the fact that the teams at NMPA that conduct official classification requests, or let's say respond to official classification requests, are not the same teams as the ones who check your dossier when you officially submit. This is always something to consider. In our practice, we do this quite often. What a submission dossier includes is product information and research documents. What I want to focus on this slide is on clinical evaluation. In China, you have 3 clinical evaluation pathways. One, conduct a clinical trial in China. Second one, predicate comparison. It's not exactly a predicate, actually. It's a technical comparator, something that is technically close to your product. Not necessarily clinically close, but technically close. And the third one is trial exemption. Usually, if your device or diagnostic is in the catalog, it is clearly marked which pathway will be accepted for you. But at the end of the day, the submission of a diagnostics product in China, as it obeys to the same rules as medical devices, requires quite a lot of documents. And all those documents, depending on how you write them, some of them can be tweaked and positioned in such a way that your regulatory program will be actually harder or easier. And in my second case study, I will come back to this. So this being said, we will go very quickly to key figures, which are, as we can see, somewhat not exactly the same as Karen, because actually it comes from a different source. And the NMPA, when they conduct statistics on the registrations, renewals, and modifications, they have their own calendar rules, which makes them a little bit different from other sources. But what we can see is that IVD reagents, in terms of registrations, renewals, and modifications, account from a quarter-ish of the total registrations. We can see that more than 13,000 medical devices were registered throughout 2023, that among them, Class 2 and Class 3 new certificates respectively count from 300 and 399, total 699, and we will see the breakdown of those later, among which IVD reagents are a small proportion. What's quite interesting is that the number of innovative medical devices, 61, is increasing year on year, 6 more this year than last year, and that it includes 9 diagnostic products. So again, as you will see from my example later on, do not assume that your device will not be considered innovative from a Chinese perspective. When deciding on your product, whether it's innovative or not, China looks at China, doesn't look at the rest of the world. If it doesn't exist in China, it might be innovative, and that might be interesting for you. Last line is also quite interesting. Only, I would say, 287 certificates were either expired or cancelled without any renewal. Everybody, be they local or international companies, tend to maintain their certificates quite well. And we do not see in our practice anybody leaving China anytime soon. Everybody is much more counting on the China rebound and looking at China with a very positive outlook. In terms of countries of origin, those 699 I mentioned earlier, the first line will not surprise everybody, and actually, I don't think the top 5 will surprise you either. USA, Germany, Japan, Korea, France. Overall, Israel on the rise, definitely on the rise. We know that Israel, in terms of medical technology, including diagnostics, is very strong, and they're actually looking at China more and more recently. But those figures will probably not surprise you. USA is still bringing the most innovation and the most new products in the medical device and diagnostic space in China. So what are the major changes that we could see from an NMPA/regulatory perspective over the past year and a half? This is going to be very interesting for you because those changes, actually, this completes what Karen just said. From the NMPA standpoint, there have been efforts made in 4 categories. First one, their skills. There used to be a time where NMPA, let's say, reviewers confronted to highly innovative products had serious difficulties coping with what was inside the dossier. And they would definitely need to gather quite the panel of specialists coming from other lines of work, for instance, doctors or scientists in China, to understand actually the product you were submitting. But now, more and more, and this we can see in our practice as well, we have very savvy, very tech-savvy and innovation-savvy reviewers that come on board, younger reviewers. And when it comes, for example, to AI-based diagnostic products, we could see a very strong improvement from the NMPA level standpoint. And all this is very good because it saves you time eventually if the exchanges with the reviewers can be made at the same level. When it comes to last generation NGS product Karen mentioned, there is a new working group in the NMPA, particularly on that. So again, if this is your field, don't worry about NMPA not being able to perceive your product's advantages and your product's particularities or let's say specificities. And when it comes to medical device classification, the committee was reinforced. So again, if we are in a situation when you need an official classification request because your device is or the diagnostic is not in the catalog, you will have in front of you a committee that knows what they're talking about. In terms of bandwidth, there used to be a time where the NMPA had 4 times as less employees than the US FDA for a country which is 4 times as big. Those times are gone. So the number of reviewers is strongly growing in Eastern and Southern China in particular. And as well, clinical trial sites. This is a trend that started in 2017, 2018. And that was not really interrupted by COVID actually. And now we have more than 1,300 clinical trial sites we can play with if we need to perform a clinical trial. And all those are very good. In terms of public health risk control, do not discount, if you're in the infectious diseases field, do not discount the fact that COVID has been a bit of a trauma for the country, as you can imagine. And if you're in that field, do not think that, okay, there are not many sick people or not many patients of this from this and that pathogen in China. Do not discount that. China might very well be interested in your product anyway, because they are trying to prepare better for the next when it comes, because we all know that at some point another one will come. In terms of risk control, you remember I told you about catalogs and the fact that some devices are either in class 2 or in class 3 in terms of risk. And we see all the time, every year, adjustments. Some products from class 3 go down to class 2 or the other way around. And this is highly impacting. It's very important to have people on the ground for you who monitor those changes, because at some point, your product might actually drop in terms of risk classification, which means, be it for renewal or for extension of your product range, an easier regulatory pathway. And then in terms of supervision and quality, there have been the implementation of a major change for active products, which means products obviously with an electrical source. All the testing, type testing standards are now implemented. There used to be a time it would take a lot of time because the testing labs would not know how to apply the standards. Now all this is gone, and be it in terms of expense or timeline, we can see that labs have notably streamlined their work. So again, that means that your registration time will be much more controllable. The LMPA is taking a very deep look on how clinical trials are conducted. And you can expect, if you are in need of a trial in China, site visits and post-trial authenticity control of your data. We've seen that more than once, and it's probably going to be systematized. In certain areas as well, China is implementing UDI, Unique Devices Identifier. You might also be facing this, but all this is actually, in terms of implementation, close to what you have in the rest of the world, which means that if you do it well in the rest of the world, it's going to work here as well. When it comes to the 2 case studies I mentioned, and very quickly, the first one is 2023 innovative diagnostic product. So this kit was approved as an innovative product in China. So I'll let you read the description. It's very interesting because it's, as you can see, it's a companion diagnostics, gene-based, and on that basis, you know, this was actually China developed. But if you are in that particular space, you might have no competitors in China in your particular space, and in that case, you might actually be able to fit into the innovative diagnostic pathway. And again, on that basis, you can go to the NMPA ahead of starting your clinical trial and have a pre-validation of what you need to do. I had the chance to do this. It cut my clinical trial time by 9 months at the very least. The second one, which is one of our clients, actually, AI-based diagnostic product, that was a very complex dossier. Talking about early detection of Alzheimer's disease, ADHD, and/or autism with an iPad, with a tablet, which it's less than 10-minute tests, very simple even for elderlies or for children when it comes to autism. That gives you, based on eye movement and short-term memory, gives you an early screening, let's say, more than diagnostic. It's a screening tool because it's very sensitive, but not quite specific. However, it's very good for screening because it's fast and non-invasive. The client came to us with the Alzheimer's disease dossier, and they had been classified as class 3. And we looked at the dossier and we found out that there were mistakes that had been made. For instance, they had positioned their product as a pure diagnostics product, whereas it's actually an aid to diagnostics. Zhenduan and Fudu Zhenduan are two different things. Diagnostic and diagnostic support are two different things. And just that little change might actually impact the classification quite a lot. And if you are a class 3, you need to go to Beijing for submission. If you are a class 2, you might actually be able to submit in a particular region where it's faster and cheaper. That's one of the things that we learned and that we did. The second one is that they did not play the innovative card on the Alzheimer's dossier. Well, we decided to play it on the autism indication because they had a patent for that. And so the first dossier lives its life on Alzheimer's, but it's complicated. On the other side, the autism is going fast, thanks to our intervention with this client, because we found out that they could be A, innovative, B, actually not necessarily class 3. That would be a class 2. That's it for me today. As Caroline mentioned, I'm based in Shanghai. Here are my contact details if you need, and I will be very happy to interact with you on any particular case that you might have or particular question that you might have. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, that was, I want to say, intense. That was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Not the first time for me to listen to a presentation about certification, but very well organized. Some of the takeaways for me was if you're transitioning to IVDR, which is a major headache in Europe, the idea that that headache can actually make your life easier in China later on, that's a nice thing to hear. For the innovative path, the innovation pathway for accreditation, you made the point that it needs to be innovative for China, not necessarily elsewhere in the world. So that's nice, actually, for manufacturers to keep in mind that they shouldn't auto-censor themselves. And then I really enjoyed your first case study where you showed the clinical trial process being shortened due to the innovation pre-validation that you did with the NMPA official. So very, very interesting. Thank you so much, Irene.
Thank you.